Dead Poets Society. That's the book I'll be reading tonight. Hopefully, this video will calm you to sleep, if that's what you're using it for. I won't be offended. Or, it'll be quite interesting. Now, I find reading off of paper pages quite hard. I often find myself rereading the same page, trying to make sense of it. If, like me, you like a good audiobook, then hopefully Dead Poets Society will be very interesting. I'll try and make it to be. It's worth noting that this is the novel adaptation. It is not the script. I do have the script, but a very special friend of mine, he gave me this book. I never knew they'd adapted it into a novel. And he gave it to me in a very classic way that he would. I think I'd mentioned that I liked the movie once to him. And I asked him back, do you like the movie? And he says, yeah, it's alright. And that's the last of the conversation. Little did we know that one another actually was immensely moved by the movie. And we've had this sort of very long journey, both watching it when we were very young and rewatching it now we're both older. One day he comes into school and he says to me, Maximus, I've got something for you. And I say, what is it? And he says, it's nothing big. And he hands me this book. He says, put this in your bag. He didn't want to make it into a big deal. And I thought it was amazing. And I never knew it was adapted into a book, as I said earlier. It's been sitting on my shelf for quite some time. I think if you've watched the movie, I mean, it's a beautifully profound movie, but it hits you deep. And so revisiting it can be quite hard. I thought, if I can revisit it with you, it'd be something special. So why don't you make yourself comfortable? And put on my reading glasses. Feel free to pause now and come back to it whenever you can. Dead Poets Society. It actually has this beautiful first page before the start. Dead Poets Society. Mr. Keating, Neil called after him. Sir, oh captain, my captain. Keating stopped and waited for the boys to catch up with him. What was the Dead Poets Society, sir? Neil asked. And for a split second, Keating's face reddened. I was just looking at an old annual, Neil explained, and nothing wrong with research, Keating said, regaining his composure. Keating looked around to make sure that no one was watching. A secret organization, he almost whispered. I don't know how the present administration will look upon it, but I doubt the reaction will be favorable. His eyes scanned the campus as the boys held their breath. Can you boys keep a secret? I think that's a lovely way to start the book. Now, let's begin. Chapter 1. Inside the stone chapel of Welton Academy, a private school nestled in the remote hills of Vermont, more than 300 boys, all wearing the academy blazer, sat on either side of the long aisle surrounded by proud-faced parents and wasted. They heard the reverberations of the bagpipes as a short, elderly man, swathed in flowing robes, lit a candle and led a procession of students carrying banners, robed teachers, and alumni down a long, state hallway into the venerable chapel. The 4 boys who carried banners marched solemnly to the dais, followed slowly by the elderly men, the last of whom proudly carried the lighted candle. Headmaster Gale Nolan, a husky man in his early 60s, stood at the podium, watching expectantly as the procession concluded. "Ladies and gentlemen, boys," he said dramatically, pointing towards the man with the candle, "the light of knowledge." The audience applauded politely as the older gentleman stepped slowly forward with the candle. The bagpiper marched in place at the corner of the dais, and the 4 banner carriers, lowering their flags that read tradition, honor, discipline, and excellence, quietly took seats with the audience. The gentleman with the candle walked to the front of the audience where the youngest students sat, holding unlit candles. Slowly, he bent forward, lighting the candle of the first student on the aisle. "The light of knowledge shall be passed from old to young," Headmaster Nolan intoned solemnly, as each boy lit the candle of the student sitting next to him. "Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished alumni, and students, this year, 1959, marks the 100th year that Welton Academy has been in existence. 100 years ago, in 1859, 41 boys sat in the room and were asked the same question that now greets you at the start of each semester." Nolan paused dramatically, his gaze sweeping the room full of intense, frightened young faces. "Gentlemen," he bellowed, "what are the 4 pillars?" The shuffle of feet broke the tense silence as the students rose to attention. 16-year-old Todd Anderson, one of the few students not wearing a school blazer, hesitated as the boys around him rose to their feet. His mother nudged him up. His face was drawn and unhappy, his eyes dark with anger. He watched silently as the boys around him shouted in unison, "Tradition, honor, discipline, excellence." Nolan nodded, and the boys sat down. And the squeaking of chairs subsided. A solemn hush fell over the chapel. "In her first year," Dean Nolan bellowed into the microphone, "Welton Academy graduated 5 students." He paused. "Last year we graduated 51 students, and over 75% of those went to Ivy League schools." A burst of applause filled the room as the proud parents sitting next to their sons congratulated Nolan's efforts. 2 of the banner carriers, 16-year-old Knox Overstreet and his friend Charlie Dalton, joined in the applause. They both sported Welton blazers, and, sitting between their parents, they personified the Ivy League image. Knox had short curly hair, an outgoing smile, an athletic build, but Charlie had a handsome, preppy look about him. "This kind of accomplishment," Dean Nolan continued as Knox and Charlie looked around at their schoolmasters, "is the result of fervent dedication to the principles taught here. This is why parents have been sending their sons here, and this is why we are the best preparatory school in the United States." Nolan paused for the applause that followed. New students, he continued, directing his attention towards the newest boys to join the ranks of Welton Academy. The key to your success rests on 4 pillars. This applies to 7th graders and transfer students alike. Todd Anderson squirmed again in his seat at the mention of transfer students, his face revealing his self-consciousness. The 4 pillars are the bywords of this school, and they will become the counterstones of your lives. Welton Society candidate Richard Cameron, Nolan added, and one of the boys who had carried the banner snapped to his feet. Yes, sir. Cameron shouted. His father, sitting beside him, beamed with pride. Cameron, what is tradition? Tradition, Mr. Nolan, is the love of the school, country, and family. Our tradition at Welton is to be the best. Good, Mr. Cameron. Welton Society candidate George Hopkins. What is honour? Cameron sat stifling as his father smiled smugly. Honour is dignity and the fulfilment of duty, the boy answered. Good. Mr. Hopkins. Honour Society candidate Knox Overstreet. Knox, who also held a banner, stood. Yes, sir. What is discipline? Nolan asked. Discipline is respect for parents, teachers, and headmaster. Discipline comes from within. Thank you, Mr. Overstreet. Honour candidate Neil Perry. Knox sat down, smiling. His parents, sitting on either side of him, patted him with encouragement. Neil Perry rose to his feet. The breast pocket of his Welton blazer was covered with a huge cluster of achievement pins. The 16-year-old stood, dutifully, staring angrily at Dean Nolan. Excellence, Mr. Perry? Excellence is the result of hard work, Perry replied loudly in a rote-like monotone. Excellence is the key to all success, in school and everywhere. He sat down and stared directly at the day. Beside him, his unsmiling father was stony-eyed and silent, not acknowledging his son in the least. Gentlemen, Dean Nolan continued, at Welton, you will work harder than you have ever worked in your lives, and your reward will be the success that all of us expect of you. Due to the retirement of our beloved English teacher, Mr. Porteous, I hope that you will take this opportunity to make his replacement, Mr. John Keating, himself an honours graduate of this school, who, for the last several years, has been teaching at the highly regarded Chester School in London. Mr. Keating, who sat with the other members of the faculty, leaned slightly forward to acknowledge his introduction. In his early 30s, Keating, who had brown hair and brown eyes, was of medium height, an average-looking man. He appeared to be respectable and scholarly, but Neil Perry's father eyed the new English teacher with suspicion. To conclude these welcoming ceremonies, Nolan said, I would like to call the podium Welton's oldest living graduate, Mr. Alexander Carmichael Jr., class of 1886. The audience rose to a standing ovation as the octogenarian haughtily shunned offers of help from those beside him and made his way to the podium with painstaking slowness. He mumbled a few words that the audience could barely make out, and with that, the convocation came to an end. The students and their parents filled out the chapel and onto the chilly campus grounds. Weathered stone buildings and a tradition of austerity isolated Bolton from the world beyond. Like a vicar standing outside of church on Sunday, Dean Nolan watched students and parents say their goodbyes. Charlie Dalton's mother brushed the hair out of his eyes and hugged him tightly. Knox Overstreet's father gave his son an affectionate squeeze as they walked around the campus, pointing to its landmarks. Neil Perry's father stood stiffly, adjusting the achievement plan pins on his son's jacket. And Todd Anderson stood alone, trying to unearth a stone with his shoe. His parents chatted nearby with another couple, paying no heed to their son, staring at the ground self-consciously. Todd was startled when Dean Nolan approached him and tried to get a look at his name tag. "Ah, Mr. Anderson. You have some big shoes to fill, young man. Your brother was one of our best." "Thank you, sir," Todd said faintly. Nolan moved on, strolling past parents and students, greeting them and smiling all the time. He stopped when he reached Mr. Perry and Neil, and he put his hand on Neil's shoulder. "We're expecting great things of you, Mr. Perry," the dean said to Neil. "Thank you, Mr. Nolan. You won't disappoint us," the boy's father said to Nolan. "Right, Neil. I'll do my best, sir." Nolan patted Neil's shoulder and moved on. He noticed that many of the younger boys' chins quivered and tears slipped out as they said goodbye to their parents, perhaps for the first time. "You're going to love it here," one father said, smiling and waving as he walked quickly away. "Don't be a baby," another father snapped at his frightened and tearful son. Slowly, the parents filtered out, and cars pulled away. The boys had a new home at the Welton Academy, isolated in the green but raw woods of Vermont. "I want to go home," one boy wailed. An upperclassman patted his back and led him away towards the door. That was chapter 1. Let's go on to chapter 2. "Walk, gentlemen, slow down," a teacher with a Scottish brogue called out. The 40 members of the junior class hurried down the dormitory staircase, while 15 senior boys tried to crush their way up. "Yes, sir. Mr. McAllister," one of the juniors called back. "Sorry, sir." McAllister shook his head at the boys who dashed out of the door and across the campus. Once inside the oak-panelled academy honor room, the juniors stood around or sat in the crinkly old leather chairs, waiting for their turns. Several eyes peered up the staircase against a wall that seemed to a second-floor door. Moments later, the door opened, and 5 boys filed silently down the stairs. An old grey-haired teacher shuffled to the door. "Overstreet, Perry, Dalton, Anderson, Cameron," Dr. Hader called out. "Come." The boys filed up the staircase while 2 boys sitting below watched them intently. "Who's the new boy, Meeks?" Pitts whispered to his classmate. "Anderson," Stephen Meeks whispered back. Old Hager spotted the conversation. "Misters Pitts and Meeks. Demetrius," he called out, down The boys looked down, turning their heads together, and Pitts rolled his eyes. Dr. Hager was old, but his eyes were sharp as an eagle's. "There's another demerit, Mr. Pitts," he said. The boys whom Dr. Hager had called followed into Headmaster Nolan's inner office, passing his secretary and wife, Mrs. Nolan. They stood in front of a row of chairs facing Dean Nolan, who sat behind his desk, a hunting dog resting at his side. "Welcome back, boys. Mr. Dalton, how's your father?" "Doing fine, sir," Charlie said. "Your family moved into that new house yet, Mr. Overstreet?" "Yes, sir. About a month ago." "Wonderful." Nolan smiled briefly. "I hear it's beautiful." He patted the dog and gave him a snack, while the boys stood awkwardly waiting. "Mr. Anderson," Nolan said, "since you're new here, let me explain that at Welton, I assign extracurricular activities on the basis of merit and desire. These activities are taken every bit as seriously as your classwork, right, boys?" "Yes, sir," the others said in military unison. "Failure to attend required meetings will result in demerits. Now, Mr. Dalton, school paper, service club, soccer, rowing. Mr. Overstreet, Welton Society candidate, school paper, soccer, Sunsville Alumni Club. Mr. Perry, Welton Society candidates, chemistry club, mathematics club, school annual soccer. Mr. Cameron, Welton Society candidates, debate club, rowing, services club, forensics, and honor council." "Thank you, sir," Cameron said. "Mr. Anderson, based on your record at Barling Crest, soccer, service club, school annual, anything else I should know about?" Todd stood silent. He struggled to say something, but the words just wouldn't come out. "Speak up, Mr. Anderson," Nolan said. "I would prefer rowing, sir," Todd said, his voice barely audible. Nolan looked at Todd, who stared, and he started to shake from head to toe. "Rowing? Did he say rowing? It says here you played soccer at Barling Crest." Tried to speak again. "I did, but," he whispered. Heads of sweat broke out on his brow, and he clenched his hands so tightly his knuckles turned white. As the other boys stared at him, Todd fought back tears. "You like soccer here, Anderson." "All right, boys. Dismiss." The boys marched out, Todd's face white with misery. And at the door, Dr. Hager called out 5 more names. As they headed across campus, towards their dorm rooms, Neil Perry approached Todd, who was walking alone, and offered a handshake. "I hear we're going to be roommates," he said. "I'm Neil Perry." Todd Anderson," he replied softly. The boys walked in to an awkward silence. "Why'd you leave Bowling Crest?" Neil asked. "My brother went there." Neil shook his head. "Oh, so you're that Anderson." Todd shrugged and groaned. My parents wanted me to go here all along, but my grades weren't good enough. I had to go to Crest to pull them up. Well, you won the booby prize, Neil laughed. Don't expect it to like it here. I don't already, Ted sighed. They walked into the entrance hall of the dorm to find a confusion of students, suitcases, typewriters, pillows, and record players. At the head of the hall, school porter stood watching a pile of unclaimed luggage. Neil and Todd stopped to look for their belongings. Neil spotted his bag and went to find their room. Home, sweet home, he chuckled as he entered the small square space barely large enough to fit 2 single beds, 2 closets, and 2 desks. He plopped his suitcases on one of the beds. Richard Cameron stuck his head in them. How'd you got the new boy? Here he's a stiff. Oops, Cameron said as Todd walked in. Cameron quickly ducked down. Todd walked past him, dropped his suitcases on the bed, and began to unpack. Don't mind Cameron, Neil said. He's a jerk. Todd just shrugged, focused on the task at hand. Knox Overstreet, Charlie Dalton, and Stephen Meeks, and showed up at their room. Hey Perry, Charlie said. Rumour has it you did summer school. Yeah, chemistry. My father thought I should get ahead. Well, Charlie said, Meeks ace Latin. I ain't quite flunk English, so if you want, we've got our study group. Sure, but Cameron asked me too. Anybody mind including him? What's his specialty? Charlie laughed. Brown nosing? Hey, Neil said. He's your roommate. That's not my fault. Charlie shook his head. Todd continued unpacking his suitcase, while the other boys talked. Stephen Meeks walked towards him. Hi, I don't believe we've met. I'm Stephen Meeks. Todd extended his hand shyly. Todd Anderson. Knox and Charlie walked over and extended their hands in greeting too. Charlie Dalton. Knox Overstreet. Todd shook their hands formally. Todd's brother is Jeffrey Anderson, Neil said. Charlie looked over with recognition. Oh yeah, sure. Valedictorian, National Merit Scholar. Todd nodded. Well, welcome to Helton, Meeks laughed. It's every bit as hard as they say. Unless you're a genius like Meeks, Charlie said. He only flatters me so I help him with Latin. And English, and trig, Charlie added. Meeks smiled. There was another knock at the door. It's open, Neil called. But it wasn't another one of their buddies this time. Father, Neil stammered, his face turning white. I thought you'd left. End of chapter 2. I think that's a wonderful place. Just stop there for the night. I think it's quite a nice adaptation. Keeps very true to the movie, very true to the script, but adding some more detail that really immerses you. I hope that was enjoyable, and I'll try and upload the next couple of chapters as soon as possible. But for now, I'll say goodnight. Thank you very much for listening.